Preparation and deployment of forces, late 1939, May 1940. The period of the Phony War, or Sitzkrieg, when both sides were preparing for conflict. In the brooding aftermath of 1939, with the tremors of conflict reverberating across Europe, a new theater of war was quietly, ominously taking shape. France, the so-called impregnable fortress, was bracing itself. This wasn't simply a gathering of soldiers, it was the orchestrating of an intricate ballet that would eventually determine the fate of Western Europe. Germany, triumphant and emboldened after the conquest of Poland, trained its predatory gaze westward. It was a colossal, meticulously planned endeavor, drenched in both ambition and ruthlessness. Late 1939 saw the commencement of a massive military mobilization that would continue until May 1940. A war machine of extraordinary scale and power was being assembled. In this period, Germany fine-tuned its revolutionary warfare doctrine, the Blitzkrieg, a tactical blitzkrieg that had proved so devastatingly effective against Poland. Lightning-fast armored spearheads, accompanied by a thunderous symphony of Luftwaffe bombings, became the heart of their offensive strategy. Preparations began to roll this armored juggernaut towards France. Meanwhile, a palpable tension coiled itself around the French nation. From the halls of power to the homes of ordinary citizens, an uneasy anticipation permeated the atmosphere. The ghost of the Great War haunted their collective memory, stirring fears of a repeat performance on an even grander, more destructive scale. During these uncertain months, France worked feverishly to bolster its defenses. The country had staked its security on the formidable Maginot Line, a seemingly impervious wall of fortifications stretching along the French-German border. As the world held its breath, France's military forces, joined by British and other Allied units, entrenched themselves behind this modern-day rampart, watching, waiting. Simultaneously, the French High Command was diligently preparing a counter-offensive plan, the Dial Plan, predicated on rapidly moving forces into Belgium to establish a formidable front line. A complex dance of strategic positioning and repositioning was taking place as each side readied themselves for the forthcoming onslaught. Yet, behind this orchestration of military might, there were also the less tangible yet equally crucial preparations. The psychological preparation of the French and German soldiers was a pivotal aspect of this stage. The French troops were mentally conditioned for a defensive war, a long, hard fight against the impending German aggression. Conversely, the German soldiers were primed for rapid, relentless offense. This was a time of anticipatory silence, a hush that belied the furious preparations happening behind the scenes. The final movements were being set in place, like the quiet before the storm. For when the storm did break, it would sweep across the landscape of Europe, forever altering the course of the 20th century. It was the prelude to the Battle of France, a clash of titans that would be remembered as one of the seminal moments of the Second World War. German invasion begins, May 10, 1940. May 10, 1940, a date forever etched into the annals of history, saw the cataclysmic initiation of the German invasion of France. This was no ordinary daybreak. This was the birth of a battlefield, where the grim machinery of war awoke and hummed with a deadly purpose. The German juggernaut was finally unleashed. The French and British forces, as well as their Low Countries allies, would face the full might of the Wehrmacht and the dreaded Luftwaffe, threatening to engulf Western Europe in a storm of steel and fire. As dawn broke, the lightning-fast blitzkrieg was loosed, changing the complexion of modern warfare with its swift ferocity. German planes punctuated the morning calm, screeching through the skies above Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The first line of the German offensive was an aerial bombardment, a brutal greeting from the Luftwaffe that would cripple airfields, infrastructure, and morale. Concurrently, paratroopers and airborne infantry were dropped behind enemy lines, their task being to seize key points, creating havoc and disrupting enemy communications. Their daring feats became legendary, encapsulating the audacious spirit of this new type of warfare. The fortress of Eben-Emael in Belgium, considered impregnable, fell in a day to these airborne invaders, a testament to the effectiveness of Germany's unconventional approach. On the ground, armored panzer divisions pushed forward relentlessly. Their objective? to encircle and isolate Allied forces. It was the Schlieffen Plan reimagined, a pincer movement on a grand scale. The invincible German force, like an unstoppable tide, poured through the Ardennes, a region considered by many to be impassable for such an offensive. This audacious gamble would become a cornerstone of the invasion, catching the Allies completely off guard. Despite the speed and aggression of this initial onslaught, the defenders were far from passive. The Low Countries, despite being caught in the storm's eye, fought back fiercely. They sought to slow the German advance, buying crucial time for the Allies to respond. Meanwhile, French and British troops were swiftly mobilizing under the pre-planned Dial Plan, rushing to aid their beleaguered allies and set up a defensive front. On this day, the battle lines were drawn and the actors took their places on this grand stage. It was the overture to a fierce and brutal symphony, the opening gambit in a deadly game of chess. The Battle of France was no longer a looming threat, but a grim reality. And so, the tides of destiny were set in motion, cascading towards a future fraught with uncertainty and peril. The course of the Second World War was about to take a dramatic turn, forever altering the contours of global history. Battle of the Netherlands, May 10th, 1940. The Battle of the Netherlands, lasting from May 10th to 1940, was as intense as it was swift. The serene, tulip-adorned landscapes of the Low Countries were transformed into a maelstrom of conflict. The mighty Wehrmacht had arrived, and their objective was clear: to claim Dutch territory as their own. The opening salvo of the German offensive consisted of an unrelenting aerial assault by the Luftwaffe. The sky was suddenly ablaze with falling bombs, and once peaceful Dutch towns and cities found themselves in the crosshairs. Rotterdam, a vibrant port city, was reduced to rubble, its once bustling streets echoing with the echoes of the bombardment. Simultaneously, airborne forces, Fallschirmjäger, were deployed to seize key locations and disrupt Dutch defenses. The bridges across the Maas and the vital airfields around The Hague were prime targets. Their strategy was marked by a brazen audacity, a hallmark of the Blitzkrieg doctrine. This was a new kind of warfare, where the lines between the home front and the battlefront blurred in a matter of moments. But the Dutch were far from unprepared or passive. Dutch forces put up a valiant defense despite the ferocity of the German assault. At the Grebbe line, a hastily assembled force of Dutch infantrymen held their ground, demonstrating the mettle of the Dutch army. In the face of the overwhelming German might, the Dutch military resistance, though ultimately futile, displayed a courageous spirit of resistance. Amid the chaos, Queen Wilhelmina and the Dutch royal family were forced to leave their homeland. Their destination was London, where they would establish a government in exile. Their departure under such dire circumstances was a poignant symbol of the dark days that had befallen the Netherlands. By May 14th, the battle was all but over. The Netherlands, battered by the German onslaught, was forced to surrender. The Dutch soldiers, who had fought with all their strength, laid down their arms. Their fight was over, but their resistance was not. The spirit of the Dutch resistance would continue to smolder in the face of the ensuing German occupation. The Battle of the Netherlands was a stark demonstration of the effectiveness of the Blitzkrieg, a wake-up call to the Allied forces. This series of events would be the harbinger of the battles to come, a grim foreshadowing of the fierce struggle that awaited on the Western Front. Despite the crushing defeat, the Netherlands would continue to play a significant role in the Second World War, their spirit of resistance never extinguished. Battle of Belgium and the Ardennes Offensive, May 10, 28, 1940. When history summons its list of most tumultuous clashes, the Battle of Belgium and the Ardennes Offensive of May 1940 hold undeniable positions. Unfurling in the verdant valleys and dense forests of the Ardennes, this two-pronged onslaught etched deep scars in the annals of Belgium's past. The whir of German Stuka dive bombers filled the air as the offensive launched on May 10th. Their objective was twofold: disrupt Belgium's defenses and cast a cloak of fear over the country. They sought to rattle the nerves of Belgium's citizenry and military alike, setting the stage for the ground assault to follow. Meanwhile, the German ground forces, the indomitable panzers, the backbone of the Wehrmacht, made their way through the Ardennes. These dense woodlands, often dismissed as impassable, had been underestimated by the Allies. But the Germans saw potential where others saw obstacles. They moved swiftly and stealthily, like wraiths in the green wilderness, capitalizing on the element of surprise. Belgium, though caught in the maelstrom, resisted fiercely. Its soldiers, albeit ill-prepared for the surprise onslaught, held their ground, fighting valiantly against a well-equipped and numerically superior enemy. The Battle of Fort Eben-Emael bears testimony to their tenacity. Despite the fort's eventual fall, the defenders' spirit remained indomitable. While the northern front was embroiled in a desperate struggle, the German forces surged through the Ardennes, a silvery steel wave crashing against the thin line of resistance that the Allies had managed to form. The town of Sedan, situated on the Meuse River, became the focal point of their offensive. The French defense, caught off guard by the swiftness and intensity of the attack, faltered, and the Germans managed to establish a bridgehead across the river. This was the linchpin of the entire German strategy, and its success spelled disaster for the Allies. The German breakthrough at Sedan would have far-reaching consequences, leading to the encirclement and eventual surrender of the Belgian army. On May 28th, the battle concluded with a grim epitaph: the capitulation of the Belgian forces. The Battle of Belgium and the Ardennes offensive were emblematic of the effectiveness of the Blitzkrieg strategy: fast, brutal, and decisive. They would cast long shadows over the unfolding events of World War II, altering the strategic calculus of the Allied forces and sowing the seeds of the calamitous fall of France. In this brutal chapter of history, the resilience of the Belgian and Allied forces shone brightly, illuminating tales of courage and resistance that would continue to inspire future generations. For, despite the adversity, the human spirit refused to be vanquished, and the fires of resistance continued to flicker in the darkest hours. Battle of Sedan, May 12, 1940. In the unfolding drama of the Second World War, the Battle of Sedan, taking place between the 12th and 15th of May 1940, has etched itself in history as a pivotal moment of strategic triumph for Germany and devastating defeat for the Allies. The sheer magnitude of the confrontation and its role in reshaping the course of the war cannot be overstated. The curtain raised on this grim theater with a concentrated German bombardment, a violent symphony of artillery and air power that sought to cripple the French defenses along the Meuse River. From the grim industrial depths of the Ruhr, the heart of German industry had come a deluge of steel, primed to shatter the tranquility of the French countryside. France, for its part, was caught in a precarious bind. General Maurice Gamelin, commander-in-chief of the French forces, had underestimated the strategic importance of Sedan and the Ardennes forest. This strategic blunder had placed the linchpin of French defense in a precarious position, undermanned and underprepared. As the German artillery roared, French soldiers at the front braced themselves against the storm. A surreal blend of fear and defiance stirred within their ranks as they sought to weather the tempest of shells and bullets raining down upon them. In the midst of this maelstrom, the German infantry launched their assault, their gray-green uniforms a stark contrast to the verdant beauty of the Meuse Valley. Tanks roared forward alongside them, transforming the picturesque landscape into a scene from a dystopian nightmare. Yet the French defense, though battered, was not broken. They held their lines as long as they could, fighting with a grim determination that belied their desperate situation. Individual acts of heroism shone through the smoke and chaos of battle, stirring sagas for the annals of time. However, the German onslaught was relentless. They advanced steadily, and by May 13th, the first German tanks had reached the Meuse, finding a riverine barrier between them and victory. Undeterred, they deployed their inflatable rafts and bridging equipment, and by nightfall, the first German units had crossed the river. A beachhead had been established, a fatal puncture in the French defensive line. The Battle of Sedan, despite the bravery and resilience shown by the French defenders, ended in a German victory. This was a triumph not just of German arms, but also of German strategy, the Blitzkrieg. The repercussions of the battle would ripple through the theater of the Second World War, heralding the grim fate of France and showcasing the terrifying effectiveness of the German war machine. In the face of such a calamitous defeat, the French and their allies were forced to reassess their strategies and positions, but it also brought forth a hardened resolution, a determination to fight back against the dark tide of Axis aggression. The Battle of Sedan, as tragic as it was, lit the spark of resistance that would gradually grow into a raging fire, ultimately engulfing the Axis powers and reshaping the world order. Drive to the Channel, May 16, 1940. There's something haunting about the phase of warfare known as the drive to the Channel. Akin to an eerie dance of strategy and maneuver, the rapid progression of events from May 16th to May 20th, 1940 unfolded in the dire theater of the Battle of France. It was an episode defined by the German army's relentless march westward, seeking to sever the Allies' lines of communication and effectively isolate their northern forces. This chapter commenced with the German forces, flush with the victory at the Battle of Sedan, harnessing the momentum. Guderian's panzer divisions were the spearhead, their mechanized might echoing ominously throughout the French countryside. They streaked through northern France virtually unopposed, their seemingly unstoppable march instilling dread within the heart of the French military hierarchy. The advance was a demonstration of the ruthless efficiency and speed associated with the blitzkrieg strategy. The German divisions moved swiftly, exploiting the disarray amongst the French forces. The retreating French soldiers, demoralized and exhausted, could barely offer any resistance. The once bucolic scenery of northern France was now marred by the signs of a hasty retreat, abandoned equipment, discarded uniforms, and the ever-present scent of fear. Meanwhile, a series of strategic miscalculations exacerbated the Allies' plight. General Maurice Gamelin, commander-in-chief of French forces, was replaced by General Maxime Weygand on May 19th. However, the change of leadership did little to stem the tide of the German advance. On the English Channel's inviting coast, the atmosphere was tense, a sense of impending doom pervading the air. Here, the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, and remaining French forces found themselves cornered. The German drive to the Channel had effectively cut off their lines of communication with the rest of France, leaving them isolated and vulnerable. As the sun set on May 20th, German tanks reached Noyelles-sur-Mer, a small commune in the Somme department. With this, the German forces had reached the English Channel. It marked the end of the drive to the Channel, but more ominously, it heralded the beginning of a grim ordeal for the Allied forces, namely, the infamous Dunkirk evacuation. The drive to the Channel was an episode of stark contrasts. It was the embodiment of the Wehrmacht's might, highlighting the efficacy of blitzkrieg warfare. Conversely, it underscored the shortcomings of Allied strategy, the grave miscalculations, and the severe consequences of underestimating the enemy. It was a lesson learnt at a steep price, etched in the annals of military history, forever reminding us of warfare's volatile dynamics. Battle of Arras, May 21, 1940. Situated in the heart of the Artois region, the town of Arras typically exudes tranquility, a characteristic peace that was disrupted on May 21, 1940. As springtime bloomed, its gentle tranquility gave way to the thunder of artillery and the relentless drone of aircraft engines. This shift marked the commencement of the Battle of Arras, a military engagement of immense significance that still echoes in the annals of history. This episode, transpiring during the pivotal Battle of France, had all the makings of a heroic stand. The beleaguered British and French forces, outnumbered and outgunned, endeavored to launch a counterattack against the formidable German forces. Amidst the grand strategy of war, the Battle of Arras represented a glimmer of defiance, an audacious effort to regain the initiative from the grip of the German blitzkrieg. In the dawning hours of May 21st, two British divisions, alongside French infantry and tank units, launched an offensive against Rommel's 7th Panzer Division. Faced with Matilda tanks, a British force known for its resilience and firepower, the German forces found themselves in a precarious situation. This unexpected counteroffensive was a stark departure from the previous defensive tactics employed by the Allies, adding an element of surprise to the assault. The British and French forces, for a brief period, made promising inroads into the German lines. The Germans, taken aback by the intensity of the attack, suffered heavy casualties. Rommel himself was almost captured during the chaos of the initial assault. Despite being a fleeting encounter, it did manage to sow a seed of uncertainty amongst the German ranks, a testament to the tenacity of the Allied forces. Yet despite the initial gains, the Allies could not sustain their momentum. The lack of air support and reserves, combined with the swift reaction of the German forces, proved detrimental. The Allies were compelled to withdraw, and the counteroffensive was halted. The German war machine, having momentarily faltered, regained its formidable stride. However, the Battle of Arras was not a futile endeavor. The attack, brief as it was, managed to delay the German offensive, buying precious time for the preparation of Operation Dynamo, the miraculous evacuation of Dunkirk. The valor of the British and French forces at Arras became a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity, a beacon of hope amidst the grim reality of the Battle of France. Thus, while the Battle of Arras failed to alter the strategic situation, its impact was felt beyond the confines of military strategy. The stand made by the Allies on May 21, 1940, imbued a spirit of resistance in the face of overwhelming odds, a spirit that would prove instrumental in the trials to come. Evacuation of Dunkirk, May 26, June 4, 1940. The beaches of Dunkirk, a seaport in northern France, have a tale to tell. A tale of bravery, desperation, and solidarity etched in the sands of time. From May 26 to June 4, 1940, they served as the stage for a dramatic chapter in World War II, the evacuation of Dunkirk, or Operation Dynamo as it came to be known. Encircled by the advancing German forces, the British Expeditionary Force, together with French and Belgian troops, found themselves stranded at Dunkirk. The rapidity of the German advance had outpaced predictions, culminating in a precarious situation with the sea to their backs and the enemy closing in. However, amidst the encroaching doom, a glimmer of hope emerged, a plan to evacuate the trapped soldiers back to Britain. The scheme that was to become Operation Dynamo was as audacious as it was necessary. It required a hasty marshalling of resources and a race against time. The British Admiralty called upon all vessels capable of crossing the English Channel. A diverse fleet was assembled, comprising not only military vessels but also civilian ones, including fishing boats, merchant ships, and pleasure crafts. The little ships of Dunkirk, as they were affectionately known, became the lifeboats in this unprecedented maritime rescue operation. In the shadow of the Luftwaffe's menacing presence, the evacuation began on May 27th. The skies buzzed with the deafening noise of the German aircraft as they attempted to disrupt the rescue operation. Yet, under the umbrella of the Royal Air Force, the rescue continued. Soldiers queued in long, disciplined lines that stretched out into the sea, anxiously waiting their turn to board a vessel bound for home. Despite the constant German air raids and the daunting logistical challenge, the operation pressed on. Days turned into nights, and nights into days as the relentless effort continued. In the face of adversity, an impressive spirit of camaraderie and resolve emerged among the soldiers and sailors alike. The notion of every man for himself was replaced with all for one and one for all. By the time Operation Dynamo came to a close on June 4th, an astonishing number of over 338,000 troops had been evacuated, a far cry from the initial estimates of 45,000. It was a momentous feat, a testament to the extraordinary courage and resilience of those involved. The evacuation, however, was not without its price. Numerous ships were sunk, countless lives were lost, and much of the British military equipment had to be abandoned. The Dunkirk evacuation was a poignant paradox. Although it marked a significant defeat and retreat in military terms, it was also an incredible demonstration of resolve, resourcefulness, and unity. It epitomized the indomitable spirit of the Allied forces in the face of severe adversity, and it rekindled hope at a time when it was desperately needed. Dunkirk, thus, stands not as a symbol of defeat, but as a beacon of human resilience and determination, a narrative etched in the annals of history and in the sands of its beaches. Fall of Paris, June 14, 1940. The fall of Paris in the summer of 1940 was a momentous event that marked a sobering juncture in World War II. This was not merely the capitulation of a city, it was the fall of a symbol, an emblem of culture, freedom, and resilience that had once stood impervious to the waves of the previous World War. And yet, on June 14, 1940, the City of Light succumbed to darkness. In the days leading up to the event, Paris was a city preparing for an imminent catastrophe. As the Wehrmacht advanced through France, there was an air of foreboding that hung heavily over the city. The rapid German advance had sent shockwaves of fear and uncertainty, which eventually resulted in a mass exodus of Parisians fleeing to the south and west. Those who remained found themselves in a city that was but a shadow of its former vibrant self. On the morning of June 14th, the dread materialized. German troops marched into Paris, meeting little resistance. The French army, depleted and disheartened, had retreated. The French government had fled to Bordeaux. Paris was declared an open city by its own military to prevent its destruction, an act of preservation that, while preserving the city's architectural heritage, left it defenseless and ripe for occupation. As the German troops filed past the Arc de Triomphe and down the Champs-Élysées, they raised the swastika atop the Eiffel Tower, a spectacle that signified the end of an era and the beginning of a dark period in French history. That day, Hitler's forces established their authority over Paris, effectively bringing the Battle of France to a grim conclusion. The days following the fall saw Paris transform under the German rule. The city, renowned for its vivacity and spirit, was muted under the occupiers. The Germans sought to reshape Paris in their image, imposing curfews, censoring the media, and administering reprisals for any forms of resistance. Yet, even under occupation, Paris refused to be entirely dimmed. The city became a hotbed of resistance activities. Clandestine operations, secretive meetings, and underground publications were a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Parisians who strove to resist their occupiers, retaining their French identity amid the oppressive regime. Looking back, the fall of Paris was more than just a strategic victory for the Axis powers. It was a devastating blow to the morale of the Allies. It signaled the strength and speed of the German military machine, changing the face of the war. But above all, it was a testament to the enduring spirit of a city and its people, who, despite facing monumental adversity, remained unbroken, resilient, and resolute. They bore witness to a grim period of history, etching tales of bravery and resilience onto the grand tapestry of Paris's legacy. Franco-German Armistice, June 22, 1940. On June 22, 1940, a moment that would etch itself indelibly into the annals of World War II unfolded in the somber depths of Compiègne Forest in northern France. A railway carriage, situated in a clearing, bore silent witness to the bitter pill of defeat being swallowed by a nation once believed invincible. This was the signing of the Franco-German Armistice, an event that laid the foundation for a European continent increasingly under the shadow of the swastika. Picture the scene. German officers led by Wilhelm Keitel, the chief of the Supreme Command of the Armed Forces, sat opposite a cadre of French representatives headed by General Charles Hunziker. The railway carriage, a symbol laced with historical significance, had served as the setting for the signing of the armistice that concluded the First World War, only now the roles had been dramatically reversed. Under the glowering gaze of a victorious German delegation, the French representatives were compelled to accept terms that were, to many, unthinkable. Among these were the German occupation of northern and western France, including the entirety of the Atlantic coast, for the stated purpose of preventing a British counterattack. The once mighty French military was to be disbanded, its surviving troops relegated to return to their homes or continue in labor or prisoner of war camps. The French government was to bear the cost of the occupying German troops, and no form of opposition or resistance against the German Reich was to be tolerated. The implications of this armistice were far-reaching. Its signing effectively divided France into two zones, the northern zone under direct German occupation and a southern zone, with the spa town of Vichy as its capital, to be administered by the French. This latter territory became known as Vichy France, led by World War I hero Marshal Philippe Pétain, and was characterized by a policy of collaboration with the Germans. This armistice was received with a mix of relief and despair within France. Relief because it represented an end to the brutal hostilities that had wreaked havoc upon the French countryside, and despair because it signaled a tragic blow to French prestige and self-identity. Meanwhile, to the world outside, the Franco-German armistice signaled the dominance of the German Reich over Western Europe. It was a sobering demonstration of how the tide of war had turned against the Allies, necessitating a recalibration of strategies to counter a seemingly unstoppable enemy. The struggle was far from over, and the armistice was merely a pause in a global conflict that was yet to see some of its darkest days.